Is called to order. Thank each of you for being here. I want to recognize myself for 5 minutes for opening remarks, and then we'll go into do you want to make an opening statement? No? We'll just go on. Russia has, we've got some people here from Helsinki I'd like to recognize first, some Ukrainian parliamentarians. Where are y'all? Y'all would stand up, please. Appreciate your comment. I'm sorry. Well, maybe we'll meet later, but I wanted you to be here for this hearing. I understand the cultural forces of the military from Ukraine are also here in Washington. Thank you for attending and for your contributions to preserving Ukrainian culture. Thank you. Russia has been an empire for most of its history. The empire of the Tsars created the Soviet Union and made way for it, but it was only a temporary thing. They were not liberators, but they were empire builders. Moscow's interests dominated the Soviet Union, and the republics were valuable for what resources the government could extract from them. It was Russian culture and Russian language that counted. That was it. It was celebrated, respected, and necessary to advance in one's career and society. Entire ethnic groups in the Soviet Union, like the Crimean Tatars in 1944, and North Caucasus people, like the Chechens and others, were deported to Siberia or other regions far from their native lands, many of them not surviving the journey. No one was ever really held to account for the crimes under Stalin and throughout the Soviet history. Stalin's policy of forced collectivization resulted in the Holodomor famine in Ukraine in 1932 to 1933, and I believe, if I'm correct, this man-made famine also touched southern Russia and Kazakhstan, and they suffered as well. 5 million people totally died of starvation during that time across the USSR. A majority were in Ukraine. This was also a time when Soviet power was going after intellectuals, writers, artists, and others. In fact, Stalin's reputation in Russia these days has received a boost from Putin's patriotic version of history, which he twists to justify his regime's crimes. Though Russia's political ideologies have changed over centuries of empire, the fundamentals are the same: internal repression of minority groups and external aggression toward countries that refuse to bow to the Kremlin. Ukraine has borne the brunt of Russia's imperial rage, but Putin's need for domination persists in its military and psychological operations against Russian neighbors and discrimination toward any and many colonized nationalities and ethnic groups. We'll also hear today how Russia is operating in Africa to spread anti-Western and pro-Russian propaganda while committing atrocities against the local populations. The United States has its own troubled past of colonization, of course, and oppression, but thankfully we live in a country where we can openly acknowledge that, discuss our history, and get better, and we get closer to being a more perfect union, other than that we still have a ways to go. In Russia, there's no attempt to have a more perfect union, only a more perfect Putin. And there's no such thing as a perfect Putin. He's perfectly reprehensible and disgusting. In Russia, so many who have suffered go unheard because truth is silenced, and because the voices of Moscow have usually been the loudest of the entire region. That's why it's so important to listen to the stories of historically marginalized and colonized people. We'll hear from some of these stories today from witnesses. We'll hear from Dr. Boakas Kasimbekova, an assistant professor of modern history at the University of Basel, South Switzerland. Next is Philip Obey, correspondent for the Daily Beast, followed by Dr. Timothy Snyder, who I know from television. He's a TV star, and I always enjoy hearing him. He also goes to Yale, or he teaches at Yale. I don't know if he went there or not. Where'd you go? Brown, okay. Well, that's same league. Different pew, same church, different pew. And finally, Dr. Maria Vyoshkova. Yes, thank you. Buryat, Indigenous Rights and Anti-War Activist and Researcher. I'm here today because Mr. Wilson, who's the chair, is under the weather a bit, so I'm taking his stead, and we will recognize whoever wants to go first. Dr.